PTA from all the grades.
Right.
Now, in certain communities, PTA is standing room only. But in the communities where you are seeing the poorest achievement scores and the biggest challenges with a lot of issues, you don't find that to be the case. But that doesn't mean, for example, just because I live in Randallstown, that I can't be an advocate for the young people in Baltimore City.
Right.
That I can still volunteer, I can still tutor people, I can still help to fundraise. I can just be an advocate. I can go to those schools and see what's going on. How can I help the principal? How can I help the vice principal? How can I help the coaches? How can I help the math teacher? So that type of need is there. Now, whether or not the community will step up and do that is another thing. Because, we used to say that safety was everybody's business, but education is everyone's business as well. So you don't even have to have a child in the school. But if you're living in that situation, or you're living in that area, your tax dollars or your state tax dollars are going into that situation. So it really doesn't make sense why you can't take, 10 minutes out of your month or an hour out of your week to just lend a helping hand, because it's no secret that some of these urban jurisdictions have a lot of challenges. They need books, they need teachers, they need substitutes, they need computers, they need everything from A to Z and back again.
And not only that, but a lot of those places also need resources outside of the school just for the students. A lot of these. I mean, if you want to talk about the urban school districts, let's say that those schools were perfect. Let's say that regardless of everybody's financial situations in that area, the schools were up to par. In those areas, they also need extra support because most of those students come from chaos. And so it's like, I just think that overall, we just have to invest a lot more in the futures of these kids, because then they'll grow up. Like, let's look at what's happening with millennials right now. Millennials are already getting flack for not knowing this and not knowing that, and we can do better, and we need to educate ourselves, and instant gratification, blah, 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 blah. But in reality, it's like, some of those things, not all of those things, but some of those things, especially regarding history, comes from a lack of education when it was time for us to learn those things. And it's only getting worse. I mean, even if people have sufficient history books, there are things that are being taken out and all kinds of things. So, I mean, that's another story for another day. But at the end of the day, it's like, I just think as a country, we can't really show outrage over this college cheating scam when we don't even invest properly into the kids' educations. I mean, that's just how I look at it.
Here.
Well, we had some feedback from the chat room, and Gina sent us some comments, and she said, and I'm just kind of backtracking to the piece we were talking about as we left out to the break, regarding this whole college scandal piece. And she says the hookup isn't new. Privilege has no boundaries. This shows that these parents felt it was okay for them to put more icing on the cake so their children could succeed. Would free college for those who wanted to go be the answer? A quality education is something that everyone wants. Maybe this will open up the dialogue for a real discussion about affordable secondary education for all. What do you think?
Now, is in California, are those state schools, are they free or close to free for those folks who live there?
Like the UC schools?
Yeah, the UC schools.
I don't believe
I don't
so.
think they're free, but
Yeah,
you certainly pay a very reduced rate,
Mm-hmm.
for attending, as you do in many states. If you're, particularly with your community colleges and so forth, and many states have adopted the model that if you go to Baltimore Community College, then you can matriculate into the four-year institutions and still pay sort of a reduced rate. So that model seems to be catching on across the country.
The other thing that this calls into question, and what Gina's, reading her question or her statement brought into mind too, is, I'm thinking about these parents trying to get their students into these colleges. It makes me wonder. I'd want to start checking the high schools they came out of, because I'm willing to bet that they didn't just let their kids go to just any old school. And how did they get them into the high school that they were in? So you start to raise the question about, where does this pipeline really start?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But I don't know if they'll go that far. But I'm sure if I was, and I don't know where they went to high school, but if I was associated with any administration that these children, these parents had their kids there, like, I'd start checking my books. I start hiding some stuff. I start trying to figure out what's going on, because they're coming that way.
Exactly.
But,
and Gina also followed up, and she had another comment regarding some of Ambezi's thoughts. She was saying that the cell phone puts the world at their fingertips. Teachers can do so much if the students were receptive to learning from bell to bell. Education has to be a community goal, because it's not so in all homes. And that's a great point. I mean, like you were saying, and like Ambezi was saying, I think it's time to start sitting on the edge. I know that, people talk all the time, well, all these kids do is they text and they Twittering and twattering and all these things, but that might be the mechanism now to get the lesson across. It may be, and I'm just making up something, but it may be a situation where kids come into the classroom and the teacher's got the lesson sitting on Instagram. And now, as unconventional and as jaw-dropping as that might be to some folks that learn from a dusty old textbook, that might be one of the ways to grab the attention of some of these kids and get that information where it needs to be.
Right.
So I totally agree with Gene. I think you need to look at every opportunity to become engaged with those students.
Right.
And who knows, by doing that, you may have some folk, again, I'll use Baltimore, for example, you may have some folks living in Columbia say, you know what, since they're letting us do that, I think I'm going to see if I can add to this discussion, since I'm a retired, history teacher. Maybe I can help with that lesson. So, I agree with you, Gene. I think that there are so many ways that we can get the community involved. And if we know the kids are using this technology, we need to meet them where they are.
And I really love that idea of, like, even, did you just say, okay, let me just clarify before I make this statement. Did you just say, like, basically it's an idea of, like, there are former educators in the community that would be willing to come out and, like, also help educate? Is that what you said?
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think that would be so cool. I often wonder why that's not a thing. Like, if you think that your students are lacking, why are there not people in the community that know a little something something that come together and they have their own kind of platform or forum to try to educate these kids on certain subjects? And also, has there ever been a thing where multiple school districts come together to launch certain programs? Is that a thing?
Oh, sure. That's not uncommon. That happens all the time, and it's more and more common.
So state to state, if they have a certain baseline, if they have a certain place where they need to be at, why is there not more of a cohesive effort between school districts to make sure, at least as a state, you're reaching that level?
Well, I think in many states that there is a sort of a degree of competition that, for example, I want the Michael County to do better than the Ambezi County that's better than the Thinbad County, so we can get, grants and scholarships and recognition and all these other things. I certainly think that is, in the spirit of teamwork, that is certainly a great idea that hopefully someone that's listening that's an educator may say, is that doable? Or maybe there's some educators that are listening that could tell us whether that's been done or not. But certainly anything that's going to bring more resources and more opportunities for success, as long as they are responsible and they and there is a way to gauge whether what you're doing is working, it's certainly worth considering. Now, I have to share this comment with you. Gina also sent a comment that said they actually learned to write by writing in the dirt.
Wow.
You know, now see, that's what I'm talking about.
That's dedication.
That's dedication. You know, you're spelling those words out in the gravel and in the dust, but you're learning. So again, if that's what they had available to them in her community, and we know the kids now have these devices that they carry around, because even if they're coming from a district that's challenged,
they got a phone.
A lot of them have phones.
Oh yeah,
they
got a phone.
So, you know, they need to really look at how can we take those phones and make them become a tool that's going to help that young person to thrive.
Right. Because honestly, they're on the phones anyways. Even if they do have textbooks, they still on the phone.
Sure.
So they could at least make it so, okay, if you're going to be on your phone, you need to log into this app. For example, they have, what is that thing called? I'm having a total brain freeze right now.
If you were older, they call it a senior moment. So we'll call it a junior moment for you.
Definitely not that.
Boom.
She still messed up from the last segment.
I know, man.
On God, my mind is racing. I'm like, jeez. But anyways, they have this app where, like, if a test day is coming up, you and the whole class plays this trivia game, and you have to be like the first one to lock in, and then you get ranked and all this stuff. But it was effective because people had fun. It was a way to review the information and all that kind of stuff. But there's tons of free, and that was a free app. So there's tons of stuff like that out there. It really is just up to the teachers and up to the schools to implement that fully in their curriculums.
And you know, but MBs, I have to do this because I have to get you fired up. But you know, when we are sitting here talking about ways that the community can help some of the challenged communities and school districts and the inequities in getting into college and so forth. And I just happened to look down and look at, and I saw the people that have been indicted, and I just had to share with you a couple of these folk. And this is from the indictment from New York Magazine. And for example, Greg Abbott and Marcia Abbott, founder of a packaging company and beverage in the beverage industry, and CEO of a private label clothing manufacturer. Gamal Abdelaziz.
Yeah. That's the former Wynn executive.
Executive, worked for Wynn Macau and MGM Resorts International.
Yeah.
Diane Blake and Todd Blake, executives at a retail merchandising firm, and they're also entrepreneurs and investors. Jane Buckingham, CEO of the boutique marketing company Trendera and author of The Modern Girl's Guide to Life. Gordon Kaplan, the co-chair of mega law firm Wilkie, Farr and Gallagher, and the American Lawyers 2018 Dealmaker of the Year. Gregory Colburn and Amy Colburn. Greg is a doctor in Palo Alto. Robert Flaxman, CEO and founder of Crown Realty and Development. Douglas Hodge, former CEO of Pacific Investment Management Company. Felicity Hoffman, Bruce Isaacson and Davina Isaacson. Bruce is president of the real estate firm WP Investments, and Elizabeth Kimmel, a Vegas and La Jolla resident and owner and president of a media company. And again, we have no idea whether she's connected to Jimmy Kimmel or not, but just the same last name as far as we know at this point. But again, people that have access to resources that most children don't have access to yet, they were engaged in such a hideous thing, is just mind-boggling to me. I just had to put that out there.
That's a mess.
A hot mess.
Yeah, you didn't hear anyone say, Doug Smith, a laid-off steelworker. Mary Jane Smith, laid off, or that kind of stuff. These people came from money and privilege. And don't get me wrong, it's great if you're able to work your way